when you render your activities digitally, you're going to be using the Sketchbook app, which is this one here. So you'll need to download that from the App Store. And then when you open it up, there's already a canvas there, but we need to create a new one. So we'll just say new sketch. We're using the measurements of an A3 So the width in this case, because it is portrait format for this first one, is going to be 2970, and the height is going to be 4200. So most of your templates will be landscape format, but this one is going to be portrait. So next thing we do is we'll import a photo. So when you'll need to go to Canvas for each time, and there are all the templates are on Canvas, so you need to make sure you've got the appropriate template for the activity. So this one is activity 1, and I've made a photo of that template that was on Canvas, and it should be in here. Oops, in here. So we go into photos, go to all photos, there it is, and here's my template. So I'm just going to make that larger so that it fits nicely on the page. Make sure nothing's cropped off, and that looks about right there. So we'll just say done. Now to render these, we are going to use the Copic markers. So that's why we're using Sketchbook, because it has that option. So here it defaults to color, but we're going to use the Copics. So here are the Copics, and they're all there. We've got all of the whole range is in there. To start with, we're just going to use the greys. So I'm going to choose the cool greys. So we've got cool greys up the top here, and then we've got warm greys. Here we have tones and the neutral greys. It's up to you which one you use. When we're in the campus, we generally use the neutral ones because we've got refills for those, but with these we don't need to refill them, so we can choose anyone. You can choose anyone that you like. So I'm going to go with the cool greys. So when we're doing the marker work, we've also got markers here that we can use. So that one's the fine point, and this one is the wider point. So we'll make a new layer so that we're not working straight onto our template. That way it makes it much easier to remove things. I'm just going to test out how broad that nib is. It says there that it's 40. Let's have a look. That's pretty good actually. You know, we can change the size of it. If it's too small, you know, we're going to end up having to do lots and lots of lines. So something that's a bit thicker. So 40 is probably a good size. So obviously we can also adjust the density. Sometimes that's going to be really quite handy. At the moment we'll just leave it for 100%, and you can adjust the slant of the tip as well. So I'm just going to leave that at the full amount as well. So when we're doing the marker work, we're just going to move across. In this case we're just going to move across horizontally. We also need to choose which actual colour that we need. So I'm going to use the C3. So I think on the brief it actually does mention to use C3 for this. So you can follow the brief for the digital as well as for using the actual markers. So to start with, we're just going to move across, and I've just noticed that I'm still on that same layer, so I must have gone back too far and gone back to the original layer. So please do make sure you keep checking that, because otherwise, you know, it's going to make a lot of problems when you're trying to remove areas. Obviously, with doing it digitally, you can go over the lines and you can always erase them later on, which you can't do using the actual markers. So I'm still going to do 2 layers of this, just like I would if I was using the actual markers, just to get rid of some of those lines. I don't mind too much if you do see the line work. I think that sort of adds to the whole charm of it all. So that's how we do just that, the flat fill. When it comes to doing the tones, so we're going to have shadows and highlights where it is quite flat, but I'm imagining that my light is coming in from the left-hand side. So that would mean that this side and this side are going to be darker. Actually, what I'm going to do next is to fill in this area here, this recessed area, while I can still see it. So I'm going to choose, so we did this in C3, I'm going to choose the C7 to do that line. And now I'm going to use the fine tip Copic. And I'm going to use the ruler as well. So the ruler is, you know, it's a little bit tricky because it doesn't always line up where you think it's going to line up. So if you do line it exactly on the line, it goes a little bit underneath. So I'm going to try it there. I'll just see what happens. So you can see that it's sort of going underneath that, underneath the line of the ruler, which in this, so you do need to make sure that your ruler is going a little bit above that line. Sometimes the ruler can be a bit of a hindrance, but I'm going to give it a go in this time. So I could have made that broader, but that would have meant more underneath as well, so I'll just go up a little bit there and hopefully that's going to line up. You will find to begin with that doing it digitally does take longer than doing it by hand. I've just realised that I've done that on the same layer, and I really should have done that on another layer just so that I could remove it if I needed to. So do keep trying to remember to add those layers. So now I'm going to do the shadow areas. So I said my light was coming from the left-hand side. So I'm just going to use the two grades up. So I use C3 for the main body. So for the shadows, I'm going to use C5. We don't want the difference to be too much because then it's not going to look like it's the actual, it's just, you know, just a darker shade of the actual object. So I use the ruler again, so I'm just going a little bit over, a little bit over the line here. It's a little bit fiddly, it does take a bit of time to get it in the right spot. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So it's A4. Okay, 8.4. So that should be okay, I think. So I'll leave it at 8.4. So that's my bottom line in there. And then I will do this one, and it's lined up quite well, so it's probably about 1 millimeter at this size over the edge of that line. Now I've gone a bit too far there, so oops. And this one here. And these edges are beveled. We're going to say that they beveled in. So if our light's coming from this side, the light would also be hitting that bottom edge, and this part, the other part here at the top, will be in shadow. So I've got to put that line in there as well. It's not high enough, got to go a bit further. So as I was saying, you know, to start with, this looks like a great option because you think, oh, I can go over the lines and all of that, but it does end up taking longer than doing it by hand, doing it with the actual markers. So that's all of the shaded areas that need to go in there. Now I need to put the highlighted areas in. So I'm going to make another layer, and this time I'm going to use the colour because putting lighter Copics over the top of darker ones will not work. So I'm going to use colour, and I'm going to put it pretty much almost white. Actually, I could make it completely white. I'm going to use the pencil option because that's what we would be using if we did it by hand. Anyway, so it's going to be a white pencil that's going to go over the top of this, and I'm going to drop the opacity down from, you know, from all the way to about 50, and I'll just test that out to see if that's going to be good, because we don't want it to be completely white. It's not like a hot spot. It's just a highlighted area, so it still should look like it has a bit of grey in it. So let's just have a look at this, how that looks. Yeah, that's probably not bad opacity wise. It just seems, you know, I just need to move it a bit down. So make sure you're using the same thickness as you've been using here as well. So we might just need to test that. That's much thicker than this grey line. So these lines need to be the same thickness. So that probably looks about right. Maybe a little bit more. So I might just go up to, and that's always the hard thing because it's so sensitive. But is that the same? No, that needs to be a bit more. Let's try 6.5. Yep, that's probably still a little bit thin. 7 would be good if I could just get it to stay there. Okay, 7.1, we'll have to be happy with that. Let's have a look. Okay, that's okay. So I'll just get rid of those ones, and hopefully I can get this to line up okay. Yep, so that's lining up there. That's pretty good. And I've got a bit of that edge still coming through, so probably could have done that a little bit better. But and so I'm actually not going all the way over that just yet. I want to do that by hand later on. And this top one will also need a bit of I know you guys are going to do this much better than I am, because you'll be taking a bit more time perhaps. Somehow it looks like my lines got thinner. Is that possible? No. Okay, so I'll get rid of the ruler now, and what I'm going to do is just draw a little bit over this edge here. So I've just dropped it back a bit to give that corner there. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So what I could do is actually fill that in a bit better, but I'll leave that for now. You know what I mean, I'm sure. And that little corner there. Okay, so now what we need to do is remove the rest of what's around here. Now we could use a ruler to do this as well, but I'm just going to use the eraser on its own, and I'll probably drop it down a bit just to make it a bit more accurate. So I'm taking a bit of care where it's closest to the edges. And then I could make it larger up here just to get that done a bit more quickly. I just noticed I didn't at the bottom yet. Okay, now we're going to put some hot spots in there as well, just to show where the light would be really sort of hitting the edges. So for that, I'm going to use the pen tool. I'm going to make sure it's at 100% opacity, and I'm going to make sure this is right on the white. Also, we're just going to, just going to put a little hot spot there and here, so that would be where the light's really sort of hitting onto our onto our object. I've just noticed that I used the same layer, so it won't have shown up where I had the white pencil, so really that should have gone on top of that layer, and then it will cover that white pencil as well. So that's basically how we're going to do these renderings digitally.